it just felt tight. Like everything just felt like so much pressure and tightness and control, but in a really icky way, kind of feeling all the time. Like it was this constant pressure on me mentally, physically, emotionally. And that was starting to get released with this idea of maybe I don't need to lose weight ever again, and maybe I don't have to weigh in ever again, and maybe I don't even need to own a scale in my house.
I'm Megan Armstrong. Welcome to Life 6 Feet Above. 6 Feet Above was created when I started to share my story of spending 16 years wanting to be 6 feet under to now living a life full and happy 6 feet above. The more that I started to talk about my journey, my struggles, and my past, the more I realized people were genuinely interested and not judgmental at all, which is what I'd feared for so long. In fact, other people wanted to talk about their story as well, and for some reason they trusted me to do so. So the 6 Feet Above podcast is my way of helping to share other people's stories, finding out what works for them to create a life of happiness. Before we start this episode, I want to let you know it has some explicit language and some very serious subject matter. It may be triggering or sensitive to certain people. Please listen with discretion. This is Abby's story. Welcome back to episode 27 of the 6 Feet Above podcast. I am joined by a newer friend, Abbey Griffith, who is the owner and founder of Clarity Fitness, which is in Decatur. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Abbey.
Thank you.
It's a Friday night, and I was so excited to do this season, A, because we're adding YouTube, B, because it's been a while since last season, and C, because I was like, I have a new studio space and we can have cocktails, and it actually makes it fun recording on a Friday night.
It's so nuts. I was looking forward to this all week. I was like,
Good.
I cannot wait.
Good. I'm so glad. And it just kind of eases people in. I'm like, you're the fourth person we've recorded so far this season, and whenever I'm like, what can I have ready for you to drink? People are like, wait, there's cocktails? I'm like, F yeah.
Hell yeah.
So happy Friday. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Even
This
though,
is perfect.
cheers from 6 feet away.
I know, right?
Even though it's, technically we're releasing on a Tuesday, but here we are.
That's perfect.
So Abby, you are the owner and founder of Clarity Fitness, mm-hmm. which I was so lucky to come visit you. I think it was in November because I remember I had to go to a Friendsgiving that night. So I was like not in workout attire.
You looked great.
Oh, thank you. Oh gosh, thank you. But your gym, obviously, as all gyms, struggled a lot in 2020. But the difference about Clarity is you opened in 2020.
We love that.
So tell me about last year, and then we'll kind of dive in deeper as to the why and the how and all of that. So just map out how last year went for you.
Last year. Let's put the wine down.
Yeah.
Last year.
I get a little angry with that.
I know, right? Just toss it. But last year was a weird year. Yeah. It was, so we opened January 6th, 2020, and then we closed March 17th, 2020. And so I think I looked at the calendar. I think it's like less than 10 weeks. Like it was just so fast. Might have been 8. And it was just the speediest open and close ever. And it was officially shut down until like end of May. So it was a quick blip. Fortunately, compared to what other fitness studios had to go through, where they're still closed.
True.
But so definitely grateful for that. And obviously, once we were back open, it was a big pivot in terms of what we were doing with safety, and every other piece of cardio equipment's blocked off, and we saran wrapped the cardio equipment and changed that out every night, and masks, temperature checks, hand washing, social distancing, all the things.
All the things. So I think you have by far the coolest, aesthetically pleasing space in Atlanta. And also the equipment, the space, just it's such a very cool vibe when you walk in there. And I've been to a lot of gyms in my life. When you walk in, it's extremely open. It's very airy. You have tall ceilings. You have different spaces for different modalities, which was really cool. But it didn't feel like a big box gym.
Yeah.
It felt very it just felt very intimate with a lot of options. How big is that space?
It's 6,667 square feet.
I was going to say, wait, don't add another 6. That might not
I know,
be
right?
right.
I was like, I always think about that, but
almost
7,000.
Almost 7,000 square feet. It's
Yeah.
a big spot.
It
big
is.
spot. So coolest part is when you walk in, you see the front desk, and then kind of over to the right, if I can remember correctly, there's a really interesting wall art.
Yeah.
Is that what you would call it?
That's perfect.
So you walk over here and she's giving me the tour, and granted, you invited me down there because it was, they were doing something on Friday nights in Decatur. So it's like this cool little Decatur square. And we had met from we were introduced through a mutual friend who was like, I think you two would hit it off. Megan has this podcast. Abby has this story. And I'm like, ooh. I'm always interested in people with a story. And so the first time I met you is when I came down to see your space. So you walk over to the locker rooms, and there's this huge wall. I mean, how tall is that wall, do you think?
I think 14 feet.
Okay. Yeah, it's a tall wall.
It is.
And behind this sheet of glass or whatever protector are scales that are busted up scales. Like, it looks like somebody took a bat to these scales. And I was like, what is this? Did you buy these? So tell us the story behind the scales, because it really is like your calling card, I would say.
Definitely.
Right?
Yep. We're like, if you think of nothing else, when you think of clarity, think of this wall.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we did buy those. We bought them off eBay, and then we beat them up. It was a really fun team building experience, but it was, we went to this signage company that was amazing, Option Signs, if anyone's looking for signage. And they helped us put out these scales on just different surfaces. They took them out to like a shooting range and shot them up, which was out of my comfort zone, but they did that. They had a great time.
Like your whole team, like all of your employees?
Yeah,
or before you opened?
The shooting part was the sign company, because that was
okay.
advanced. That seems like a liability issue.
Like,
sure,
yeah,
it was
you're like, that's
something's gonna go
actually
wrong.
not in your employee agreement.
Exactly.
Can't do that.
Like, we didn't sign this. We did the pickaxe one, which was equally fun, but a little less
So you
terrifying.
literally just took axes to these scales?
Whacked them.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Where did that idea come from?
So that is actually, it became a really big eating disorder recovery movement. So stepping away from the scale is really a sign that you're not equating the number on the scale to health, which is super important. And then also not making that have to do with your worth. I feel like we're all very consumed when we're in diet culture or weight loss regimes, and it's all about looking at that number on that scale and figuring out how we can make it shrink and how we can take up less space. And smashing the scale is symbolic of, hey, I'm not going to subscribe to that anymore. So it's been pretty cool to do those events and stuff. Want to keep doing those for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So obviously you mentioned eating disorders, and this is such a theme in fitness. I mean, it's a theme in everyone's life, but I feel like the fitness industry especially, and it's not really talked a lot about. I mean, I think eating disorders and disordered eating is talked a lot more these days than, 10 years ago. But within the fitness industry, I think there's so much shame as an owner, as an instructor, as a whatever, because we're supposed to be the examples of health. And I actually did this post yesterday on my story. It's like, I struggle still, and it doesn't make me any less of a fitness instructor or a fitness professional. It just makes me human. So what did you go through as far as your eating disorder, and kind of what period of time did it start?
Yeah, so that's, I guess now looking back with what I know, it was probably around maybe even first grade. I was really little when that message started getting sent to me that something was wrong with my body. I remember the first time, because when you're a little kid and you're like, let me show you my belly, and like everything's just big and fun, and you're like, everything's great. So that was my way of doing things until first grade, because I remember like it was yesterday still, we were learning about corsets and about just like middle Middle Eastern, middle times, middle everything culture and clothing and all things. I think it was supposed to be an empowering lesson, but I mean, at first grade, you're just like, what are these things? What are these things?
Right.
And so one of my classmates had made a comment like, oh, poor Abby, when we were talking about that. And I was like, that was a weird comment. Like, whatever. Yeah, I would be so uncomfortable in those. And she follows up and she says, no, it's because you're huge. And that's exactly the face that the teacher made. And I felt like I modeled my reaction to that off of the teacher, because at the time I was like, am I? Like, oh, whatever. I didn't assign value to that. But when I saw the teacher, it was like, oh, I'm sad now. And I remember making a decision to copy that messaging. And I think that now, knowing what I know, that's so interesting, because I opted into it in that time in my life. And then there was all types of healthy kids, healthy weight camps that I had to go to. And my doctor was worried about my weight as a little kid. And I think I had a personal trainer starting in 5th grade. And
5th grade?
It was a lot.
Wow. So you're young, right?
Yes.
You're 24. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is also insane that you're an owner of a studio at 24, which is amazing. We'll get back to that.
Okay.
But let's go to your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
You are, first grade is what? I don't know, 10?
6.
Oh, wait, you're right.
Yeah.
Because kindergarten's 5.
Yeah.
Wow, it's way off.
That's okay.
Usually I'm pretty good at that. All right, so first grade, you're 6 turning 7 or whatever. And there's no shame until you see shame from an adult.
Right.
And that's how we learn.
Right.
That's how we learn. So do you remember, looking back, leading up to that point, do you remember how was food presented to you?
I feel like before that point, it really wasn't a thing. I think that it was, my parents both have very different relationships with food, I think on either end of the spectrum, in terms of guilt and in terms of what they feel they quote unquote should be doing and stuff like that. They've really worked on that since they found out that I was struggling. And so they have an amazing relationship with food now, which I so love and appreciate them for. That's been really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't think that they really talked to me much about it. It was just kind of here's what's on your plate, eat it, which now we know is kind of an issue in itself too, but it wasn't intuitive. It was just here, eat what's on your plate. But then once Healthy Kids, Healthy Weight started, it was sessions about different vegetables and here's a pepper you can't leave until you eat this pepper, and here's a cucumber you can't leave until you eat this piece of cucumber, and find what you like, and but it was forced on you. It was very weird. So that was a funky relationship with food thing. And then I really didn't think much about it until when I went to personal training in 5th-ish grade. I had a nutrition assessment. Yeah. And I remember going into the office of this gym, and she basically asked little 5th grade me, what are you eating? And what's your favorite food even? And I told her there used to be this restaurant, this sports bar that my dad and I would go to all the time. And I loved the potato skins and was so excited to talk to her about that. And she pulled up the calorie count on her computer and showed me and was like, do you know that this is what you're eating? And I was like, no. And then
what
she
does that
told
even
me,
mean
exactly,
at 5th grade?
Little 5th grade me. And I was like, no. And then she was like, well, here's how much you should be eating, and and just went into that. And of course, me being a people pleaser and me being a little 5th grade person was like, oh, okay, I'm sorry that I was doing that. Let me get better. Let me do better. And that kick-started a not-so-fun cycle.
Right. So, and therein lies the issue. Or, part of the issue. Yeah. Right. So are you from here?
No, I was born and raised in Cleveland.
Born and raised in Cleveland. Yeah. Are parents married?
They were. And then 7th grade, they split up. So that was
okay. So how long did you live in Cleveland?
Cleveland was until I went to college in Miami. So until I went to school down south.
So all through middle school, high school.
Yep. High school, I was in boarding school, but it was still in the Cleveland-ish, Ohio area. So
Okay. All
got
right.
some freedom there kind of, but it
Yeah,
was then
yeah.
college was fun.
Do you have siblings?
I don't.
Okay.
Just
Oh
me.
yeah, that's like
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. We're
Us
twins.
only children.
I love it.
I love it. Like, it's so refreshing meeting someone that's like an only child, and we get this stigma that we're spoiled and we're stuck up, and it's so untrue.
I agree.
We're just, we're just kind of like figure it outers. Like we
Right.
figure it out all the time.
I agree.
So what was it like growing up in Cleveland? Were your parents, did they both work? Middle class, upper class? Give me the whole background there.
Yeah, so I am bred from a whole long line of lawyers. So they were both lawyers since they met in law school. So
Oh, wow.
since I knew them, and then my grandparents were lawyers, and cousins and uncles and lots of lawyers.
Jeez.
So dad works with employee benefits and employee rights, and is really focused on making sure that businesses are treating their employees well. And
Okay.
then mom works in the nonprofit sphere.
Got it. Okay. And so I'm asking because my dad's a lawyer, and growing up, he wasn't around. Like, I don't want to say this because it sounds worse than it was. Like, he worked a lot. He was working all of the time. He still works all of the time. But he was very present when I was a big swimmer. Like, he was at every swim meet. He was, it would be 3-day meets, Friday through Sunday. Like, he was always there. He was my softball coach. Like, he was very in my life. Were your parents around much? Because it's a taxing position.
Definitely. Yeah, I think they definitely were. My mom was around probably more. And then my parents split up, and I spent most of my time at my mom's house until when I went to boarding school.
Okay.
It was like an hour-ish south, and dad ended up getting a house down there. So then I kind of spent more of my time with dad, and ended up not boarding, but still going to the boarding school as a day student my senior year. And that was like the best year ever. And I lived at dad's house for that. So it was very fun.
Did dad let you party more than mom?
He
or
did,
what?
yeah.
or maybe not let you party, but just was like, there's always one parent that's a little bit more oblivious to what you're doing.
Like selectively oblivious.
Right?
That was him.
Right? Okay. Okay, but in those first formative years, until you're in first grade, did you have sit-down dinners? Did you have breakfast together? Like, what was the eating situation surrounding meals? What was that like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I remember I feel like most of the years that I was going to the pre-boarding school, breakfast would be in the car. So it was just like a functional, like, get it in, go to school kind of thing.
Like
lunches,
some sort of crap, like granola bar.
Like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like, here it is. Here's some juice. So that was breakfast. And then lunch got funky in middle school, because I think that was when I went to an all-girls school, and I think a lot of the girls got sucked into diety things by then, unfortunately. So it was like, see who can skip lunch and and who can eat the least, and just really toxic, not helpful messages. So lunch was hit or miss, and then dinner would be usually sit down with both of them until 7th grade, and then usually in the TV room with mom for after that.
And did your parents cook?
Mom is a big cook.
Okay.
So, and then I cooked for dad.
Do you remember if the foods were unhealthy? Like, I guess my question is, how did you get to the weight as a first grader where it became obvious that, maybe you were were you overweight? Were you heavy, like, looking back? Or was it just kids being mean?
Yeah, I think I was definitely in like a slightly bigger body, but I think that it was mostly fueled, like, conversations with my doctor, I feel like were mostly fueled by me, because I was like, hey, there's something that's being pointed out and I don't understand, so help me fix it. And instead of having an eating disorder aware kind of, hey, let's get educated on weight not being a bad thing kind of conversation, it was like, oh yeah, here's how you fix that problem.
Got it.
There's no problem to be fixed, I now know, but it was definitely that was the messaging that I was perpetuating, and I feel like just people didn't know better to
Sure.
pivot the conversations.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Wow, that's great. And did your mom ever have any of this going on?
I think that both my parents have uncovered some things going on. I feel like
Right.
a lot of times people, I don't want to say a lot of times, but there are cases where people have eating disorders and don't know.
Right.
And I think that just relationship with food was very touchy with both of them.
Mhm.
And it definitely, there was a lot of guilt around this is bad food and this is what you should be eating and that's too much. And now why should we even resist this or whatever? It was just very toxic, like in terms of relationship to just fueling their body and eating what they enjoyed.
Right.
So
Right. And did you play sports growing up?
I kind of did. I was definitely more into just going to the gym and working out with my personal trainer.
Okay.
Boarding school was funky because there was a 3-sport requirement there. So
Really?
it was, yeah. And when you haven't played volleyball until 10th grade, then you start playing volleyball. It's
You're
weird.
like, no, that's
I'm
not
like,
gonna work.
what do I do?
Right, right.
So they have like varsity and then JV and C squad and D squad. I repped D squad. Held it down for D squad. And I got up to C squad, I think.
So
senior
funny.
year.
So the reason I ask about if you played a sport is because I feel like kids that play sports, especially, again, just looking at my life and some of the people that I knew on my team, we were so flippin' active. I mean, by the time I was 12 and 13, I was swimming 8 miles a day. I was lifting weights. I was training for a sport. And I never really had to think about my weight. Like it was never, I was a bigger kid, but I was tall. So I carried weight a little bit differently. So I felt like you can, when you're working out that much, quote unquote, you're playing a sport, you're that active, you can get away with eating crap food. And, I'm quite a bit older than you. So back then there was really no education. We would just eat chicken fingers and pasta, and we would literally carb load, nights before big meets. So for you, again, you were 14, 10 years ago. I mean, that's not too long ago. And social media was definitely present then. Like all of these things were much different than when I was younger. So I was just interested to see how that played a role. I remember at 13, my swim coach came up to me and he was like, you would move a little faster if you didn't have so much to pull through the water. And that was kind of like the start of my whole thing. Yeah. So it's interesting, like what triggers, this thing that we kind of have to deal with for most of our lives or a big portion of our lives. Yeah. So you're in 5th grade and you're personal training, and do they actually they're teaching about calories, or what do they talk to you about, and how do they try to relate to you as a 11 or 12-year-old, however you are old at 5th grade?
Yeah. So I feel like I feel like I have a different kind of connection to it now. Again, it's like a lot of like 2020 hindsight kind of stuff.
Right.
But a lot of my trainers, I looked at them then and still look at them now as like a big sister figure. Like they were just, they were there to have fun. And I remember workouts not really being intense or hardcore.
Okay.
I actually remember, because there was a pretty fast turnover of trainers because I was there. Well, not fast, but I mean, I was there since 5th grade through college when I would come home for breaks. So it was like a solid line of personal training, and probably went through like 5 of them because they ended up getting new jobs.
How often a week did you personal train?
I want to say like twice a week
And
for like 12 years.
Your parents obviously were like, you should do it. Like, was this an option by you? Who you wanted to do it?
Yeah, it
Okay.
was always me leading that ship, I guess. And it was definitely, they looked at me as little sisters and just cheered me on. And I think that some of the things that they were cheering me on for, I kind of wish that they wouldn't. Or I remember going to college, one of my trainers had made a passing comment to me, like I was literally walking down the stairs to leave, and she was like, "Don't get an eating disorder." And I was like, "Oh, I won't. I don't like to throw up." And that was what I thought eating disorders were.
Right.
That's all I thought it was.
Right.
Tis not. So I was like, I actually reached out to her about a year ago and was like, "Hey, where did that comment come from? Like, what did you see? And
Yeah.
like, maybe we could have sat down and like had a coffee and talked about it, but whatever. Like, what did you see that triggered this comment? And she's brilliant. She ended up going to work for a hospital. She ended up furthering her education from personal training and got into some really cool other stuff, and now knows a lot more specifically about relationship to food too. So she had said that I just seemed very obsessive and compulsive around, like, if you told me work out this many times a week and do this, like it would be to a T that would be happening. And I feel like the perfectionist in me, like that's so supported and that's so encouraged in today's world, but that's dangerous. And I tell a lot of fitness professionals, like, your star students are usually the people to just double check in on, because if someone's gonna, like you say, jump, they ask how high. Sometimes that's not fueled from them being in the driver's seat of their own relationship with their body and their food. So she had commented about that, and she had said that I was always just so upset with how I looked, which I totally remember, and that's totally true. I would body check like our whole session, and she was like, and I really didn't see anything that there was to be upset about, and you looked fine. And again, not to perpetuate that one body type is okay and the other body type should air quotes be working toward this way of living, but she didn't see what I saw. And so there was definitely some body dysmorphia stuff going on, and total obsession around tracking and counting and planning and calorie burn. And so it totally already had one, but didn't know at the time.
Right. And did you ever talk to your parents about it?
I feel like, in, again, retrospect, they saw that I was doing things but didn't know where the line was of what was healthy and what wasn't. And I think because ultimately, like, I was doing what a lot of people do. I was tracking everything, and I was paying attention to what types of foods I was eating and staying away from things and going towards things and making rules for myself and discipline in air quotes and all of those kinds of things. So they were like, oh, she's just really taking her health seriously. It wasn't connecting to what happens if she takes a rest day that wasn't on this arbitrary schedule, and what happens. And I wasn't training for a sport. I wasn't training for anything at the time. It was just general training to chase the carrot on the end of the stick about liking what I saw in the mirror, and that's not the way to do it.
Right. And also, like, you know, not to like discredit your parents or anything, but I think a lot of times, like, when you hire a professional as a parent, I've had some conversations with friends with kids with like ADD and ADHD, and I'm like, that's great that you send them to a professional and they're open to talking to them, but that's 1-2 hours a week, maybe, right? That you're training with somebody. What about the other however many hours are in a week that they're home with their parents?
Right.
You know, why aren't we talking to our kids about this?
Right.
And somebody saying I mean, gosh, I look at, if I could look at myself now and tell my 8-year-old self, I'd be like, you eat those whatever you want, because it doesn't really matter when you're that young. It doesn't necessarily matter when you're older either. It's just about the quantity. And, you know, that becomes more important as you get older and grow up.
Yeah. And so that intuitive eating piece, I feel like that was just such a game changer for me. I feel like there were certain foods that, even quantity wise, like frozen yogurt comes to mind. That was my go-to. So all through college, it was like, if I had frozen yogurt, I was going to eat more than a whole bowl full. Like, it was like I would only give myself, quote unquote, permission to have it X amount of times a week or a month or whatever. Yeah. And when I had it, I was going for it, and there was no stopping me.
Right.
But what I realized when I dove into my relationship with food more, that no one had really told me before, is this piece, and you need a professional to walk you through this, because I feel like it's very scary to navigate this alone. But she helped me look at what power that food had over me, and helped me look at I was so consumed by rules around that food, and in my head I was like, this is a bad food, I shouldn't be eating this. So I need to have it once a whatever, and that's it. But she gave me permission to have it however much and however frequent I wanted. And of course, in the beginning of that, you go overboard a little bit, but it ultimately, like, I haven't had froyo in like a year plus because I just, like, the desire is gone. And I took the steps that I needed to enjoy the froyo experience and to eat it slower and to figure out what felt good. And then she was like, what if you tried stopping when you were done? And that took a few times for me to try because I felt this scarcity mindset of, oh, if I don't have it now, I'll never have it again, which is so not true because I could literally just walk down the street and get it again. But your brain does funky things, and just it didn't even end up in a relationship with food now. Like, it didn't even end up being like a controlled balance or a controlled quantity, because it just, if you work toward this intuitive relationship with food, your body will check that itself. Your body doesn't want to eat heaps and heaps of froyo all day, every day. Even if you feel like your brain wants to, your body's like, hey, that's not going to feel
when
good.
You have a stomach ache or you wake up the next day. I mean, it's kind of the same thing with alcohol. Like your body kind of rejects it.
Absolutely. Right? And it doesn't, it's not a control thing, or I hear the word balance and like, yes, but it's definitely like, it's not controlled balance. It's not, I have had froyo, so now I must have a salad. It's checking into what your body is asking for. And that, again, is like years of work. So it's not something that happens overnight. But that's been really, really cool for me, is like, I don't need to stress the quantity as much anymore. I really don't think about it. And it's balanced itself out because I've put in the work to figure out what that looks like.
Right.
And that's something I wish I could tell my old self for sure.
At what point in your life did you look in the mirror and say, I have an issue?
I think my friends did that for me.
Really?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you just had an unhealthy relationship with food, but what would you label it?
Yeah, it was pretty severe anorexia since.
Okay, so you actually like really cut the calories.
For sure.
Because I think there's so many terms surrounding disorders and eating and disordered eating.
Mm-hmm.
I was just made aware that there is a difference because I was anorexic in my teens and then bulimic in my 20s.
Yep.
And those are very much eating disorders, whereas disordered eating is kind of where it starts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's right?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry, go on. I just want to make sure,
perfect.
like, we kind of like, I hate labeling things, but I think in this sense, when it comes to these sorts of terms or like depression and bipolar, like it helps to clarify.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I think more people than not are in some capacity dealing with disordered eating.
Correct.
And eating disorders are a next level, but aren't uncommon. They're the second highest mental health killer, second to opioid addiction right now.
Wow.
So it's just not getting the conversation time and the attention and the support that it needs, unfortunately. So that's why I think these conversations are just so important. And being able, I think that one thing that I wish I had talked about, or at least heard and understood earlier in my journey, was that sick enough idea. Again, air quotes. I feel like I didn't identify as being anorexic because I wasn't X pounds.
Right. Or emaciated, where people are like, your bones are showing.
Right.
Like, you can have a problem without, or an issue without it being like physically apparent.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And you can see it in blood work, and you can see it with relationship to food, and you can see it in so many other health metrics, but it's not, I didn't identify again because I was like, well, I look quote unquote normal, whatever that is. And I was like, it's fine. And that's what my family, my friends assumed too. They were like, oh, she's just disciplined, or she is just in control of her food. I wish I had her rigidity, her discipline. And it's idolized. And it's so sad that we've built this understanding of something that was so scary and so hard to get through to be something that people are like, oh, I wish I had that problem. And it's just like, oh my gosh.
Well, it's also really sad that society places worth based on your size.
Absolutely.
Like, that doesn't make me, the way you are as a human being, the way you treat everybody else, the way you speak to people, that means so much more than what size jeans you're fitting in.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
So was it in college, or when was it that your friends pointed it out?
Yeah, it was, let's see, second semester of sophomore year. So we were on spring break.
Okay.
And I had what I deemed to be too many chicken nuggets at a buffet. And they heard me trying to make myself sick after dinner and busted open the bathroom door. And we had a Hail Mary intervention for a second. And lots of tears, lots of unfun. And one of my friends at the time, she had, and I knew this, I've known this since pretty much we met, she went through her own eating disorder struggles. And so it was super nice to have her be someone who got it.
Right.
But I feel like I also didn't tell her straight up because I didn't want her to do anything with that information because I wasn't ready to do anything with it myself. And then she ended up contacting my parents and they got me into therapy, and it was done well. I totally appreciate my friends for kind of going around and making that happen because I don't think I would have done anything with it. And whether that felt great in the moment doesn't really matter because it feels really good now. It's totally saved my life.
It sounds like they weren't shameful of you.
Right.
Definitely. I think, and I would love your opinion, but I think when we think about bulimia, there's this like disgusting like notion. Like people look at you and they're like, that's disgusting. Like, how could you do that? And it's like, you don't know. You don't know until you've been in somebody's body and somebody's mind. And it is what it is. It happens.
Yeah.
And so that sort of shame is another reason people don't want to talk to it because it's like disgusting. Like, how could you do that to yourself? Right. So that's actually you're the first person I've talked to where their friends busted in when they actually heard it happening. Because I think a lot of friends, and especially at 18, 19, 20 years old, like a lot of friends will ignore that.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I don't acknowledge that that's happening to her, we don't have to deal with it.
Right.
So were you mad at them when they contacted your parents?
For sure. I was like, you couldn't give me like 24 hours.
Well, they did it like right away.
Pretty much. It was like the morning after I woke up and there was a text from my mom on my friend's phone. And I was like, really? But again, she had every right in the world to make that decision. And I think that again, it was a step in the right direction. My mom was awesome with it. She instantly, just like me, went into problem solving mode and found the best therapist in Miami for it and got me booked the next week. And I think he said that I was like a month away from inpatient and having to go to the hospital.
Do you remember how much you weighed?
I definitely don't want to share that just in case there are people with eating disorders, but it was
good to know.
Definitely.
It was borderline. It was to the place where you would really need some medical help.
Yeah, and just the level of which there was anxiety around it, I think, was also perpetuating that because he saw that, like, if he told me, hey, go home and do this for my recovery, I probably wouldn't. And so when you're in inpatient, it's monitored and regulated and people can see, are you eating and are you not, and what are you doing after the food and what's happening there. And if that level of obsession, I lived alone in college, like if that level of obsession had continued, that would be definitely not a good situation. So he was worried about that. And yeah, I remember the weight that I weighed was a goal weight that I had heard some girl say her goal weight was in like 7th grade. And I was like,
gosh,
that sounds like a good number.
Like regardless of age, height, whatever.
She,
right?
Yeah.
Body
and
type.
it's just, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just like people, I think that's something interesting too. Like people, whatever that target weight is, like, where'd you get that number?
Right.
And just like, no one asks that. They're
Right.
like, oh, it's because that's what this person in this magazine weighed, or like, this is,
yeah.
and it's just like, do you hear yourself?
Yeah.
Like, just check in on that. I think that's
but
so
also
important.
people that have no knowledge of this, like, how would you know?
Right.
How would you know that that's unhealthy or that that's not actually ideal or that every human body is different and sitting here, we're burning different amount of calories, right? No matter
exactly.
where you are, what you're doing.
Yeah.
So did they pull you out of school, or they let you stay in college?
Let me stay in college. So that's a big blessing because that's not always the norm. But yeah, I stayed in college and very, very slowly moved in the direction that I needed to go. And the first thing, and again, I don't want to make this sound like it was like a bad thing because it was an amazing journey. And I feel like I got life back. I feel like that big energy that you had pre-first grade, that came back a little bit. I don't like walk around like showing people my belly yet, but like maybe one day.
Well, it starts to, for people that aren't familiar, and this is eating bulimia especially is so far, like they don't understand how you could possibly do it.
Yeah.
It becomes an addiction. It's like anything else. It becomes an obsession, and your whole day is surrounded by like, where am I going to eat? When can I get home? Basically. What am I going to eat? Because there are easier foods that come up that don't. That's a lot of information, but I think it's helpful to expose this disease. Because for me, I feel like when I went into that place where I needed to get home, I needed to get to a restroom, you almost black out. Like, you feel so bad that you did it, but it feels so good at the time. And you black out, and like, it's almost like you wake up and you're like, oh, just did that again. Yeah. Is that how it felt for you?
For sure. Yeah. I don't know if I've ever like publicly said this, but I remember there was one time that I purged and my dad called like the second that I was done, and I just picked up the phone and was like, "Hi, Daddy." Right. Like, it's just like a different universe. And it was, and I heard myself do that, and I was like, "Ooh, that was kind of scary." But I was like, whatever. Yeah. It's like, you always think like, "Oh, it's not that bad," or "Oh, I could stop if I really wanted to." And
or this is going to be the last time.
Exactly.
This is going to be the last. I'm just going to go all out tonight. This will be it. This will be it.
I never got to that point. Definitely. I was like, eventually, like, I think I was so in it until that spring break time that, like, then when they caught me and when I went to therapy, I never made a decision that was my last time. It ended up being my last time, thank God. But it was definitely like, it was more of a shame response. And like, I don't really care what makes you stop doing it. Like, just find a way to stop doing it.
I wonder if, and I haven't done a lot of research because it's been several years since, thankfully, I've had to deal with this. But I feel like it's a pretty, not normal, but pretty common thing to go from anorexia to bulimia because you realize you have to eat something, and then you do, and then you feel really bad about it, and that just kind of morphs into bulimia. Is that how it happened for you? Like, you did it just sort of like happened. Like, it wasn't like there was no stop and start. It just kind of transitioned. Yeah. And it becomes easy to just purge and get rid of it. Yeah.
That was definitely, we definitely need to put a trigger warning on this episode. But
so on every episode I have that, there's an intro. It's like, this is explicit material.
Perfect. Okay, yeah.
But like, this is
it's an important conversation.
It's important. Like, this is fact. This is what happens. Like, people need to talk about this for sure, so that people that are listening right now that are doing this, that they're not feeling shamed for doing it. Like, there's something deeper going on in your life. There's a reason you're doing it. For sure. And you have to expose those reasons so that you can get to a healthy state.
Exactly.
But it has to be a real conversation. It can't be sugar-coated. And that's what the show's all about.
That's awesome.
Doesn't sound fun. And there will be a lot of people that tune out because, whatever. But there will be a lot of people that tune in because they know someone who might be going through this. For sure. And maybe it will help them deal with them a little bit differently versus saying like, oh, you look really unhealthy, or you look this, or you look that, versus like, hey, like, what's going on in your life? Like, what do you, like, let's figure out the root cause. Why are you doing this? Right. Why do you feel badly about your body, the way you look?
Definitely.
Right. So maybe we can start to understand and have compassion for people that have these types of disorders, and we can help them in a different way versus making them feel like they have to stay in a closet forever.
Sure. Yeah.
So how long before your friends kind of busted you.
Yeah.
I mean, how many years was this going on, the actual bulimia part?
The bulimia was really, I definitely agree with, like, it was that slow transition in. It was, and I haven't done much research on, like, how common that transition
same.
is.
I should, yeah.
I know. I'm very interested but that was the case for me. And I was, unfortunately, there's so many different ways to purge that there are. And I get so sensitive because there's so many different things that I've read about just like responsibly sharing your story. And like I get nervous to share too much, but I totally agree that like having somebody be able to just share what's happening. So like, hey, if this is you, there's
hope.
Sick enough to get help, and you can have hope.
But you have to be ready.
For sure. Absolutely.
So it sounds like you were ready. Like you were able to look in the mirror and be like, you guys are right. Like this is happening. This is going on. And you agreed to get help?
There were times that I feel like ultimately being sick there making myself sick there in that room was a decision. Like I knew that I was in a hotel room with my girlfriends and that they're not dumb and that I'm not dumb and that if I do this, someone will probably hear this. Sure. Also, they've seen how stressed out I got over the meal that I ate, and they've seen just me getting more rigid and stressed out. Like if I had planned to go this place for dinner and last minute it changed, now my whole day is quote unquote ruined because I've planned my macros out around this day and this time and this food, and now I can't use that anymore. So what do I do now? So like just a lot of pretty obvious red flags, especially for someone that's been through it before. Like she knew something was up. So so I feel like when I made myself sick, it was a cry for help in a way. Sure. And it was cool to see them step in like they did, and just the different ways that I was getting rid of food. Like there were laxatives, there was coffee and just different things that I thought were quote unquote normal that weren't being used. Like if you drink coffee, you don't have an eating disorder, but if you're drinking coffee to get rid of your food, that's an eating disorder. Right. So there's, again, not saying that is true or deeming anyone
that was
disordered,
what you went through.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was the root cause for why that was going on.
Did you feel when they walked in and busted you, did you almost feel like a sense of relief?
I think so. It was like I finally was like seen.
Exposed.
Yes.
Right?
It was like, and I think being in the therapist's office for the first few times too, and seeing him, like I'd say XYZ and he would respond, he would react like, oh my gosh. And that was in a really messed up way validating to be like, oh, like this is his job, and he sees what I'm doing as something that I could change. And like that's. So
how did you, and you call yourself what do you say, how do you refer to yourself as a recovering? There's something on your Instagram as like a
recovery warrior.
Recovery warrior, right? Yeah. So how did you get? Because I think it's so terrifying when somebody's in it, that they think it's never going to go away. They think it's never going to get better. It's almost easier to just kind of stay in that space than actually do the work and to get better. Right. So what were the steps? Kind of how long did it take? And do you struggle still on and off?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like my big step was just that first step. My big step was, hey, something feels funky and I don't know what to do with this information, but I'm just going to like put this on the table and like see what you guys do with it. Right. And then they took that step, which was awesome. And then going into recovery, I feel like a big shift for me, while it has led me astray, the perfectionist in me wanted to be the best recovery ever. So I was like, whatever, like let's pivot into a more productive angle. And I feel like it's ultimately, it was basically switching one obsession out for another, which I feel like has been kind of a pattern of life that I'm still growing from. But because first it was, okay, well now I'm going to be the best recovery ever. And now it's, I'm going to crush it in this business world. And it's one thing after another. So I feel like with the recovery, I dove in and my therapist talked about what's this body positive thing. Maybe this would help you. So I went and followed every body positive person on Instagram and I created an Instagram page where I was doing my best to share my story and share my recovery. And there are so many cringeworthy posts now, but it was worth it. And it was something that was able to help me process. And it was like a verbal blog / diary, just everything on that page. And I've since kind of fallen off that page. I don't know really why, but I think that it served its purpose. And now I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to publicly talk about all the things anymore. It's fine. No,
until this podcast.
Exactly. Now I'm like, juicy juice, but definitely. But I feel like it really was, it was definitely teaching other people what I had learned helped a lot. And diving into a new world that felt better and landed me in a less, it just felt tight. Like everything just felt like so much pressure and tightness and control, but in a really icky way, kind of feeling all the time. Like it was this constant pressure on me mentally, physically, emotionally. And that was starting to get released with this idea of maybe I don't need to lose weight ever again, and maybe I don't have to weigh in ever again, and maybe I don't even need to own a scale in my house. And
do you own a scale?
Oh no, not at all.
I'm like, if you do, it's smashed up somewhere.
Definitely right. Yep, it's on the clarity wall.
So it sounds like would you do therapy like maybe once a week, working on really changing your relationship with food, working on making a little bit better decisions, surrounding yourself with all these friends that knew about it, like letting people know that you're going through something is huge, because they can support you and they'll support you differently.
Right.
If they're your true friends. If they don't support you, then you don't want them in your life anyways.
Absolutely.
And that goes for family too. I think that's huge.
That's very huge.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of family members that they may see you as, whatever, and you can remove yourself from family. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's especially as you get older.
Yeah.
And you find a group of friends that become family.
Absolutely.
So you did the work, you're doing the process, and you had this idea of opening a gym. Because remind you guys, she's 24 years old. So you really graduated, 2.5 years ago?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was the recovery journey was definitely, I was going to therapy probably, I would say closer to 4 times a week.
Really?
It was intense. It was basically as close to inpatient and not being inpatient as one could patient. So
okay,
I
so
did that.
All right. Well, yeah, you mentioned that before, so you were right there.
Definitely.
Wow.
And it was what I wanted to do. I don't think that that's the right way or the only way, or I think there's other ways. Yeah, there's totally other ways. And like, if you can't afford that much therapy or can't make time for that much therapy, it's not to say that your recovery isn't going to happen or isn't going to still have a potential of being amazing. Right. So, but yeah, for me, that was the journey. I met with a non-diet based nutritionist twice a week and my therapist twice a week. And the non-diet based nutritionist was specifically the food stuff. So it was like just relationship with food 101, good food, bad food doesn't exist. Food that is more nutrient dense for you and less nutrient dense for you exists, but you don't need to assign a moral value. And that shows up in so many different ways. That shows up in, oh, I ate so bad today, or, oh, like I'll be better tomorrow. Like there's just so many variations that same message creeps into everyday dialogue. So ditching that and shifting that and exploring that and figuring out the science behind food and figuring out what felt good to me and what I enjoyed. And those shifts were massive. And therapy was really, really amazing. And there's this, I think it's, I'm going to totally blank on the name of what it is. Acceptance commitment therapy, I want to say. And I want to say that's it, but it was definitely, that was a big game changer. It was like these demons on a boat, and it has nothing to do with religion. If you don't subscribe to that, that's totally fine. If you do subscribe to that, having demons on your boat doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that there are thoughts in your head that aren't keeping your best interest at their
Bay.
Exactly.
No pun intended.
Right? Like all the boats.
Right.
So this idea of being out at sea on this boat and you're just kind of floating around. And if you turn toward shore, which means stability, which means ditching your eating disorder, which means ditching your obsessive behaviors, which means finding friends that actually lift you up, the demons or whatever you want to call them underneath the deck go crazy and come out and scream at you and get in your face, and you turn the boat back away from shore because that's too much and that's too loud and that's too scary and just kind of go back to coasting. But eventually the coasting doesn't work and you turn back and the demons come out again, and eventually you realize that those demons can't actually do anything to you, and they are loud and they are real and they're in your face and they're very scary. And that's not to minimize how crappy that feels, but it is true that you can ignore them or work on getting them a little bit quieter and work on addressing them as a thought that's not there to actually keep your best interest at bay, and it's not there to help you, and you can choose what you do with that. And so when that voice comes in of, oh, you ate too much, what are you doing? You've lost control. You can be like, that's BS. And you don't have to listen to that, and you can keep letting it talk at you and keep moving toward shore.
Yeah.
So
I think it's just about learning that we are so much more powerful than we think we are. And I mean, we let it get to a place where it happens every day or a couple times a day, and you were letting it happen. Therefore, you can let it not happen. You can. It just is going to take a lot of work. But you either choose to live in that space forever, or you choose to take as much time as you need to get out of that space, knowing that you're going to be tempted throughout your life. Like you're always going to be recovering. It's always going to be there. You're always going to have those voices. But like you said, they become quieter and quieter and quieter.
Exactly.
So how did you get to Atlanta?
Atlanta was my girl crush always. I love her. She is amazing. So I was in Cleveland, and I was
wait,
like,
who are you talking about?
Atlanta. She's a female.
Right.
Decided.
I'm like, wait, who is that?
So I was in Cleveland and went to, I think it was like a leadership camp or something at Georgia Tech. It was just some like cute little conference, but I started to explore Atlanta more when I got home and was like, hey, this is a really cool place, and there's so much culture, and there's so many young professionals, and there's just this kind of energy about it. And so I liked it in high school, and I was like, I feel like I'll end up in Atlanta. And then I went down to college, and once I had the idea of clarity, it was a really big light bulb moment when the idea of clarity came to mind when I was going through my own recovery and decided that more people needed to hear this message and have these conversations and get resources and not subscribe to the health stuff that isn't actually health. It's for a bottom line to sell a diet, sell a weight loss supplement, whatever. But yeah, so I had realized that Atlanta just ended up being the perfect place for that journey because it was a big city with a lot going on and a lot of people that were not only aware of fitness, but really had an appreciation for mental health.
Sure.
I remember I talked to someone in Miami, Florida, where I went to school about the idea of this body positive gym, and she was like, well, let me know when you figure out a diet plan. And I was like, ooh, something didn't click. Like, we weren't speaking the same language.
You're like, you are not my demographic, but thank you for listening.
No, it was a good talk.
Yeah.
So that's what I felt like Miami would bring to that equation. Is I don't think it would, and again, not to stereotype an entire city.
Sure.
I had a great time in Miami, and there's so many amazing people in the eating disorder recovery space down there, but it just didn't feel like it was ready to obtain that message. Yeah. And still, even in Atlanta, it's sometimes I'm speaking a different language to people, and I say I have a body positive studio, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
And that's
body positive studio. So it's not a gym.
You
it's not a training.
Gym.
No, but I like that you use those terms.
Yeah.
I think it sets you apart. I think that you can feel that vibe when you walk in there.
True.
So would you start the build out 2 years ago or something? And did you Do you have investors? Are you a solo owner? If you want to share any of that, you're welcome to. But
Definitely.
would love to know how a 24-year-old, is capable of opening a space that big. It's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely, so the construction process sucked, and it was all funded by my amazing family. They had their own entrepreneurial journeys and put their money, their lifetime earnings toward my dream and making it happen.
That's
so
awesome.
3 generations of entrepreneurs coming through.
Because,
so
you said your grandma was, right?
Yeah, my grandma and grandpa opened business laws that ended up getting bought out by Thomson Reuters, which is a legal company. And they basically wrote like articles that helped bring legal terms to layman's terms, and got taken in by a lot of different colleges and just exploded. And then mom started her own legal firm.
Sure.
And then I started Clarity.
But never any pressure for you to become a lawyer?
No.
That's so cool. So you're like, I have this idea. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling stronger. I'm feeling more confident. I'm recovered, and I want to do this space, and I'm going to move from Miami to Atlanta. And they were like, we support you. Here's the funds.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a long conversation of that.
That just summed it up in 35 seconds.
A year in 35
seconds. Right. So there you go. So you find the space, which, that could be like a whole nother podcast in itself. But find the space. Where are you in Decatur?
Right in the heart of downtown Decatur.
Yes. Okay. I'm like, I know nothing about the streets, but I know she's like right in the heart of Decatur. And what services do you offer, and what can someone expect when they come?
Definitely. So we like to just explain ourselves as a full service studio, full service fitness facility. So we've got personal training and classes and gym space in the front and turf in the back and private personal training rooms. And we do events and webinars and all the things. And then since COVID, we've started Clarity Online, which has actually been really amazing. I really love that platform.
Do you?
It's really cool. Yeah. At first, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm starting another business. And so that was a little bit of a
totally
pivot.
Separate thing.
It totally is. It's like literally its own entity, but it was definitely, that's been awesome. It's half on demand body positive fitness videos, workouts. So they're pre-recorded. You just pick whichever one you're in the mood for and play it, and you're good to go.
So cool.
And then I love that part. That was super fun. And then the other part is these mental health groups. We call them community groups. And there's different topics. There's one for runners. There's one for new moms with a pelvic floor physical therapist. There's one for just general body positive community. There's one for intuitive eating. So we're trying to get more of those going. And we'd love to have one for every sport one day with some body positive professional leading it.
Sure.
So that would be really cool. And that's been our virtual side of things. And we do virtual personal training too. And just bring in all the things.
I'm like so in awe of you.
Thank you.
I feel like you're an old soul. Have you ever gotten that?
I get that a lot.
Yeah.
I think
everyone says that about me, or they used to when I was your age. But
the only child thing.
Yeah, I think so.
You gotta play with the big kids when you're like 4.
Yeah. Plus, like everyone just thought I was older no matter what because I was huge human being, but you are now open. So when I first met you, your gym wasn't quite open yet. Like people could come in, but your group classes were not up and running quite yet.
Right.
Are they now?
They are.
Okay.
So that was a COVID
studio
decision.
Space.
Yeah. So we had the classes, but then COVID, we were being nervous about it, and rightfully so, wanted to slow things down. But we're back to it and love it. And we're still capped at 6 people, which kind of is a bummer because I feel like it's such a party and there's so much potential for those classes to be so fun. And they are so fun, but it's with 6 people.
Yeah.
So, but one day we'll be out of this and we'll be able to bring that back. But it's definitely, we've got the classes back. We're adding new ones. We're going to bring in a pom-poms class where you can get your inner cheerleader on.
So
and
cool.
Just all the things. We want it to be a place where you can go and work out however you want to. It's Planet Fitness, but way bougier and without the
Yes.
judgment-free zone crap, because they ultimately end up judging other people in that judgment-free zone. So we don't do that. And just like creating a space where we can really all, like every workout, you forget that you're working out. Like you're just having fun and moving your body and not worried about calorie burn or whatever.
Like you don't have the heart rate monitor up there. You're not in the orange zone or whatever zones.
Right.
I don't even know the zones, and I'm a personal trainer.
All
I'm like,
the
I don't know,
zones.
whatever. Like, do you feel good? Is your heart pumping? You're sweating? Great. Good for you.
Cool.
Good for
Done.
you. That's so cool. I really, I wish I lived closer, because I would 1000% be there. I've struggled a lot with the virtual.
Yeah.
Not in the sense of like teaching it, like I can teach to a brick wall if I
Same.
need to, but as a consumer, I thrive on being in this space. I'm about to start teaching cycling again, and I get the Peloton, and I totally support everyone doing the at-home stuff. But I took a class last Monday, very rhythmic beat-based class, and it just reminded me there is nothing that can replace the energy of a group of human beings in the same four walls going after the same goal in a different type of way.
Absolutely.
And somebody asked me last year if they thought group fitness was done. And I'm like, no, we're just on hiatus.
Right.
It is coming back.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be better than ever, because people need that. They need the in-person connection, just like they need to get back to offices.
For
Like,
sure.
Nothing replaces that.
I completely agree. It's like people say that like since Netflix, movie theaters are done for.
Yeah.
That's just so not true. It's like
not.
I will go to a movie all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
All the
call
time.
me for a movie day any day.
I'm so proud to say that I know you. I think you. I'm excited to see where your future goes and what's in store for you.
Thank you.
And just like keep being you.
Thank you.
Keep being open and honest with your story and your journey. And we all have setbacks, and we all, like, I still kind of fall off the wagon here or there with just feeling like crap about my physical health too. So that's totally normal. Even when you say you're recovered,
Right.
you know, we still just figuring it out.
For sure.
Where can we find you on the gram?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So it's Clarity Decatur is the gym. And then my once influencer, not so much influencer page is Abbey, Abbey Griff, GRIF.FIT as in fitness. And Clarity Online's online.clarityfitness.com. And then clarityfitness.com is our website.
Awesome. So reach out if you are struggling. I think the one thing about the two of us is you don't have to reach out to us about working out. You can reach out to be like, hey, I'm going through this.
Absolutely.
And I just want to tell somebody I'm going through it, and to be able to relate to another human being that's been there. So don't be afraid to reach out. And thank you for sharing your story.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me the space to do that. That was amazing.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the 6 Feet Above podcast. I'm your host, Megan Armstrong. Subscribe so you never miss another episode, as a new episode is released every Tuesday. And if you're enjoying the series, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Follow the show on Instagram at 6 Feet Above Podcast to keep the conversation going, and feel free to reach out to me directly at Megstagram11. This episode is a product of Audiographies, produced by Megan Armstrong and Denor Sepolia, edited by Jacob Smolian, and the music is by Keenan Willis. Funded by yours truly. I'll see you next time.